Welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thanks so very much for watching, downloading in more than 150 countries around the world, and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. And today we are speaking with somebody who has quite the tale to tell, somebody who has been through it, to put it mildly. We're talking about POTS. We're talking about EDS and something called MCAS. And you may not know what that is just yet, but we're going to get into it. And you're going to say, wow, this woman is amazing. Beyond that, she is an entrepreneur, has a phenomenal new restaurant in the Washington, D.C. area. We welcome Molly Gibson to the Exam Room for the first time. Molly, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on. I love the podcast.
Yeah, I love your story, so let's just dive right into it. Looking at you today, you look absolutely healthy and happy and vibrant and glowing, as has been the case with a lot of people who have these incredible stories like yours. This was not always the case for you. How different is your life today versus, a few years ago?
It's completely different. My life has taken a total 180. I was diagnosed with a couple chronic illnesses when I was 14, a sophomore in high school, and they left me completely bedridden. And it was a complete shock and completely changed my life. But I am completely back to normal now, thanks to a plant based diet and some other things, and living probably healthier and happier than I was even before all of that happened, too.
14. That is a very difficult age. Were you athletic? Were you a cheerleader? Were you a basketball player? Did you do track? What were you up to at that age?
At that age, I was actually rowing crew, so really intense exercise. And I was rowing with varsity as a freshman too. And I was working out probably 7 days a week, really intense. It's kind of gross, but they would put buckets in between the ergs even, which said you weren't allowed to get off unless you were literally passing out. But it was a lot of fun, and I loved being out on the water. I was also a straight A student, social butterfly. I had a bunch of friends and was always doing stuff with them too, and just had a big life that all of a sudden tumbled and sort of went down the drain with these chronic illnesses when it all started.
Ooh, yeah, overachiever, straight A's, rowing crew, out there doing your thing. I love that about you. And crew, by the way, just as an aside, very rarely do we have people on here who do crew. I think that you may only be the third person in the history of the show. No lie, that is a super difficult sport. You must have been in some incredible physical shape at that age.
Yeah, it was crazy. I think I put on 15 pounds of straight muscle at the time. And I remember I was sore just getting off the couch during that first week when I first joined. I'd have to roll off and then slowly stand up instead of just going from seated to standing. But it was a lot of fun. It was worth it. Winter training was never that fun, but I really did love being out on the water. And it's a good sport for anybody who's thinking about doing it.
Were you up north in the New England area, or were you doing that around here in the DC area?
No, so I actually grew up in the DC area. I lived in DC until I was about 5, and then my parents moved over into the Bethesda side on the Maryland side after that. And so I was rowing at Bethesda Chevy Chase High School, and we would actually row out at the same boathouse that Georgetown University rows out of down in Georgetown. So I take the Metro down every day and do that.
So you guys were just like rowing out there on the Potomac. Y'all would be the people that were rowing out there when you drive over the Key Bridge. You'd see everybody in the water doing you know, their thing. I always look like a lot of fun to me, but man, whew, yeah, that's a tough sport. But let's talk more about you. We'll save crew for another interview here, Molly. When do you remember the first day that you kind of woke up, or maybe something just wasn't right? When did you start to really feel sick?
Yeah, so I remember it was a day in my sophomore year of high school, and I was on the erg actually at crew practice, and I just wasn't pulling the numbers that I was used to pulling, and I couldn't understand why because it felt like I was fully exerting myself, and so I couldn't figure it out. And my coaches were sort of like, "What's up with you this week? You're not as strong as you usually are, and you're not pulling the right numbers." And I went home after that, and I just felt like I had gotten hit by a truck, and I ended up thinking that I probably just had the flu or something. And so I stayed home. And then by then it was Thanksgiving break, and I still wasn't better by the end of that and was still at home, bedridden, sick. And the week slowly turned into a month, slowly turned into a couple months. And by then, my doctor knew something was wrong, and we were on the hunt, sort of trying to figure out what was up and what I had, since I wasn't getting any better and was just getting worse day by day and was in a lot of pain. And, there's no amount of like Advil, Tylenol, anything that could touch it at the same time. So I blacked most of that out at this point, but it wasn't fun.
I can't imagine. Yeah, and I'm sorry to make you relive these difficult memories. Really just kind of want to paint the picture for what it was like for somebody who might be kind of in the same shoes that you were. You'd be amazed at the stories that people hear and then they learn from, and it can kind of change their whole outcome, their trajectory. So that's what I'm hoping to do with you here today. And without re-traumatizing you, I guess is the best way to put it. I mean, compare this kind of sick and pain that you felt with what a lot of us might be more familiar with in terms of the aches and the pains that come with having something like the flu.
Yeah, so it was definitely like having the flu. Absolutely everything hurt. My muscles, it hurt to touch my skin, my bones hurt. I had headaches all the time. I remember I was so sick I wouldn't even watch TV. I would just sit inside with sunglasses on the couch. And at the time, I wasn't connecting the dots. But with POTS, it's sort of when it activates for some people when you go from a supine position to sitting up or standing up. And what was happening with me too. And because it affects the autonomic nervous system, which is everything, it affects your eyes dilating so that they don't dilate properly. And then you get headaches and migraines from too much light coming in. And it gives you a lot of GI issues. And then, of course, when you don't pump your blood properly, you pass out when you stand up at the same time. And so it was sort of just total body nervous system dysfunction that took a while to catch, but it did feel like a full out flu for a long time in the beginning.
So, yeah, what was your diet like leading up to this? Clearly, you were very physically active. Were you also eating what you thought was a healthy diet, or was it the typical teenage diet and I'm going to eat what I want and burn it off when I'm on the water?
Typical teenage diet for sure. I grew up vegetarian, but I was a vegetarian that pretty much only ate carbs and cheese. And so I lived off of like pasta and grilled cheese and stuff like that. Pringles, just had a horrific diet. And I was actually self medicating for a while, which is at least what my doctor said, where every day before crew practice, I'd get a giant can of salt and vinegar chips and a Gatorade. And the salt intake and the electrolytes, it would help get my blood pressure up. And that would help me not pass out as much at practice. But yeah, my diet was absolutely awful before that. And I'm not surprised I got sick looking back on it and all the things that I was eating and completely avoiding vegetables and any whole foods.
So, POTS is, in my understanding, not a common diagnosis, and it can be something that is rather difficult to diagnose. How many doctor's visits did you have before they finally settled on that as what was ailing you?
It was quite a few doctor visits because at the time it was less diagnosed. It's definitely more diagnosed now, and it's also really similar to long COVID. So there's a lot more research coming out on it. But my doctor somehow caught it a few months in, where one day something clicked for her, and she said, "Lay down, let me take your blood pressure and your heart rate." And then she had me stand up, and I think that day, laying down, my heart rate was in the low 60s, which was normal for me. And then standing up in less than 8 minutes, my heart rate went up to 200. And that's when you black out and pass out. And she diagnosed me then, which I think was probably 3 months after I initially got sick. But at that point, we were just happy to have answers. And POTS is also sort of commonly misdiagnosed as a heart condition, when really it's just autonomic nervous system dysfunction and your heart's working properly, but it's working overtime trying to keep you from passing out and just reaching heart rates that are too high.
Yeah, and those autonomic disorder illnesses, those are really, I think the best way that I've heard that described is a case of the all overs, where it feels like there's no part of your body that, is not in some way, shape, or form touched by what's going on. The autonomic nervous system, I mean, it controls everything. You probably felt like you had zero control over your body at that point.
Yeah, it controls everything, so it affects everything. So it's sort of hard to pinpoint exact symptoms because, like you said, it's just sort of everything all at once dysfunction from GI to, like I said, the eyes dilating, you get migraines and fatigue and brain fog was one of the worst ones too. Whenever you're upright and your heart rate goes that high because your blood pressure drops, because your nervous system isn't telling your veins to dilate and constrict to send the blood back up to your heart and to your brain, you end up losing a lot of memories too because your brain isn't getting enough blood during the day. So I don't remember a lot of my high school experience, honestly. And to this day, if there's ever like a bad flare up, like if I get sick or something and it just lightly activates everything, still, I'll get brain fog and it's not fun. It just feels like your brain can't work properly throughout the day.
Is it almost like I've heard other people describe it as being almost like drunk, but you're not drunk at the same time? That's uh, it's I don't want to call it an out of body experience. You're present, but you can't retain anything, and you have zero ability to concentrate. It's just a weird experience. How would you describe it?
Yeah, brain fog is kind of tricky. It's sort of like your brain can't formulate full sentences or full thoughts. You just sort of lose it halfway through. You can't recall things as easily. And it sort of does feel like being drunk or like high or something against your will throughout the day, which is why I've never really done drugs or anything after that. Cause I'm like, I spent most of my high school feeling like that when I didn't want to. But yeah, it's not a fun experience at all. And it feels like there's this cloud or this fog. The name for it is pretty accurate around your brain, and you just can't get through it and break out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that you went through that, and especially at 14. I mean, when you had everything kind of going for you, you know, uh, emotionally, what was this period like in your life?
It was definitely hard because at the time I went from being fully active, I was rarely home, to being completely bedridden, unable to do as much schoolwork. And at the time, because I wasn't able to return to school, I had to do home and hospital tutoring, which is pretty much homeschool, but instead of your parents teaching you, the teachers from the school come after school closes and do sort of private one-on-one tutoring to get you through and to make sure that you're keeping up with your schoolwork. And it's sort of a miracle that I was able to graduate on time. At the time, doctors and my parents were pushing me to sort of take a year off, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to graduate on time. And I think kids that age can't really understand when bad things like that happen. And so at the time, I lost most of my friends too, which was also hard. And so it sort of put me in it was just a hard thing to go through, especially when I felt like I didn't have any support from most of my peers at the time. And then when I did eventually come back to school my junior year on a reduced schedule, I didn't tell anybody what had happened. And so there were all these rumors at school that I'd like gone off to rehab or like had a baby or something crazy when really I was just spending most of my time in the hospital and at home sick.
Did you feel, was there shame that you were trying to hide that? Is that why you were not really willing to talk about it, or what was the feeling there?
I think so. I think there was shame because the people that I did tell didn't stick around afterwards. And so I started associating telling people with them leaving afterwards and not being able to handle it. And I think at the same time, too, I was living through it. I was still dealing with it, going to physical therapy. I was still going to doctor's appointments after school, and my friends were going out. And I think at the time, I just didn't want to have to spend any of my extra time thinking about it. So if I could talk about something dumb like boys or parties during the weekend, I'd do that instead of talking about something that I had to deal with the rest of the time.
Right on. Well, I'll tell you this much. I think going through what you did at that age definitely made you a stronger adult. You don't realize it, and it absolutely sucks at the time. But boy, I would say in terms of wisdom acquired, you are well ahead of your current day peers. That's for sure. So you get diagnosed with POTS, but then also, there's EDS and then something called mast cell activation syndrome that were ailing you. Were all three of these things going on simultaneously?
They're all interconnected, or comorbidities, I think is what you call them, where the mast cell ties into the EDS and the POTS ties into the EDS and all these different things. At the time, I didn't know that I had EDS or mast cell when I was diagnosed with POTS. The mast cell diagnosis came my freshman year of college. And then the EDS diagnosis, I think, was around the same time. And both of those were absolutely wild dealing with those. And I'd never heard of them before because those ones are also kind of rare. And at the time, a lot of doctors didn't even believe that the mast cell activation disorder was real. And so that was also tricky getting a diagnosis for what was happening to me at the time.
Yeah, let's look at mast cell activation syndrome here for a little bit. There's at least one pro athlete right now, a pro wrestler, who has been unable to compete at a very high level. They just suddenly vanished from TV because they were diagnosed with this and they've been struggling. So what is mast cell activation syndrome?
So it's a dysfunction with your mast cells, and your mast cells regulate sort of an immune allergy response. The way I explain it to people is usually that it's like an autoimmune disorder, but instead of my body attacking itself, my body attacks absolutely everything else in the world. And so my freshman year of college, I started having all these allergic reactions to things that I was eating and was totally fine with before. And they were anaphylactic ones. So I ended up in the ER a lot, and I didn't know what it was because I was having trouble doing an elimination diet. Because with mast cell too, one week you can eat carrots, and then the next week you'll have an anaphylactic reaction to it because your body just randomly decides to go DEFCON 5 over that thing on that one day, and it moves around, so it's hard to diagnose. And it got bad enough where at one point I was down to just eating 3 foods, and I was even going anaphylactic over tap water if it wasn't filtered first, which was crazy. And that was really hard because I went to a lot of allergists and they were like, you just have an eating disorder, until they actually saw me have a reaction to something. And then I finally got diagnosed by Ann Maitland, who is a specialist. And I think she's one of the top doctors in the country that deals with this. And she got me on some medications and a diet that completely cleared it up pretty much. And within a couple months, I was able to eat most things again, which I was very happy about.
I would imagine, again, you're going through this at a very interesting age for a normal person, and then you have all of this on top of it. EDS, can you break down what that is for us?
Yeah, so that one is a connective tissue disorder, and it means your collagen is sort of loose. And so, like, my joints and stuff can all hyperextend. And it comes with a bunch of really funky things, and it gives you a higher chance of having like POTS and mast cell activation disorder and stuff like that. That one, I don't know, I never had any like symptoms that exactly correlated to that. It was more the other two, and that one just happened to probably be the root cause of the other two that they found. And it is genetic, so a lot of people in my family have it, but they don't have any symptoms, or there's nothing wrong with them, but they do have it.
All right, so let me ask you this. How many different medications were you trying throughout this time in your life? I would imagine that your bedside table might look like, the average 80 to 85-year-old, who has a prescription bottle for every and anything.
Yeah, they sort of threw an elephant gun at me at the time. There wasn't as much research. And so they were like, you might outgrow it by age 26. You might have it forever. Some medications might work. There might be nothing that works. And you just decline for a couple years. And they put you on meds that 80-year-olds do take for like heart failure and stuff. And so I remember some of the first ones that they tried were beta blockers, and those made everything worse. And I don't even remember everything that they put me on, but it felt like every other month they were trying something, and it was just making absolutely everything worse. Except for the mast cell meds, those ones really did help. But for the pot stuff, it was just finding diet and exercise eventually, and listening to my gut and cleaning up my lifestyle completely, that eventually helped.
Yeah, let's talk about why it was you kind of got this idea to clean up your diet to see what would happen. Obviously, one of the things that we talk about a lot here on the show is the fact that doctors aren't really trained too much in nutrition. So, how did you begin to connect those dots for yourself?
I'm lucky that I had my mom taking care of me during this time period. And she was a lawyer before and used to doing tons of research on things. And she was looking for cures or something that would help nonstop and reading all the latest journals on it. And she eventually came across some research studies that had been done linking dairy to flare ups with POTS, and gluten too, and all these other things, and, pesticides, stuff like that. And so at this point, we had tried everything else, and I was still getting worse. And we figured, what's the worst that could happen? And we switched over to a plant-based, gluten-free, and low-sugar diet. And that's when I also started physical therapy at the same time. And at the same time, I also started meditation and trying to clean up my stress levels and stuff like that. And everything helped so much. But healing your gut biome and GI disorders and stuff, at least the ones that I had along with the POTS, it takes a couple months to a couple years to fully heal. And so even though we were seeing differences, it was incremental, and it felt like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And it just took a while of sticking with it before I really started to take off and, heal everything.
So was this a baby step process for you? Because you said that really enjoyed the traditional diet. I mean, did you have to wean yourself off of cheese, or was it kind of an overnight decision? Is like dairy is done.
It was hard at first because I wanted to eat all those things. And especially when you feel like you have a flu, you just want to sit on the couch and eat like potato chips and your comfort meals, which I couldn't do at the time. And I was getting so sick every time I ate. I lost a ton of weight. I was a skeleton at that point. And I eventually started associating eating dairy with feeling awful. And that made it a lot easier to come off of it. And so even though it was sort of baby steps, like doing dairy first and then gluten and then all these other things and trying to remember what things have gluten in it and what things have dairy in it, um, it wasn't that hard in the end because I felt so much better eating a plant-based lifestyle and doing gluten-free that it just made everything worth it. And I didn't even think about eating ice cream or pizza or anything after a couple months.
Yeah, and I hear you talk about, just having almost like an aversion to food for a while there because you got so sick after every time you ate. And food is something that we enjoy. I mean, you used the term comfort food just a minute ago, and every meal, in a way, is comfort food for us. And as somebody who was super sick, and just what is it like to be so turned off by something that you used to love or look forward to so much? A lot of us will never experience that.
Oh, it was awful because I grew up cooking and baking all the time. That was my stress relief. I loved food. I would make my family dinners most nights, and my mom's side of the family is Italian. So for Christmas, we would just do batches and batches of cookies and Italian lasagnas and the works with everything. So food was a huge part of my life. And having that taken away, especially with the mast cell stuff, where I was down to basically just eating like squash and rice and brown rice protein. Um, I was devastated by it. And I remember at the time I was living in New York City, and my roommate would come home with this Chinese food every night. It would smell so good. And I'd sit there with my mouth watering, being like, I can't wait until I can just even eat like a raspberry again, or a piece of lettuce, or just a green leafy vegetable, or Chinese food, or something. And it was a hard time period, but it really gave me an appreciation for food. And once I was able to start adding things back into my diet, again, still fully plant based and gluten free, this was more when the mast cell stuff happened. It was like seeing the world in color again. And it gave me such an appreciation for it. And raspberries tasted different. And even just eating like a piece of arugula by itself, I could taste the pepper in it. And it made me fall that much more in love with cooking again and having it and being grateful for it.
So, what was it like trying to push through and maintain as much normalcy as possible? You just mentioned that you had moved to New York from the DC area. I mean, that's a huge move again for anybody, but here you are struggling with your health. What was giving you that drive to keep pushing through?
I think I'd always been sort of a type A person, and it had been drilled into me that hard work and determination will get you anywhere. And so I knew I could get myself back to a normal place as long as I didn't give up. And all I wanted was to be normal again and be able to go out to eat and hang out with my friends and not have to worry about my fatigue levels and headaches and feeling sick all the time and getting anxiety when I did go out in case I started to feel sick. And I knew I needed to get back to that place of normalcy. I think it's just, I don't know. I've always been determined, and my mom would probably say very stubborn. And I think those qualities helped me a lot with recovery because I never gave up on it, even when it was hard. And, physical therapy too, being forced to work out when you feel like you have the worst flu of your life with no energy and just want to lay in a dark room. I think crew helps me a lot with that too, honestly, because you're taught to overcome not feeling great and just push through and get it done. And all of that really helped me.
Yeah, I think there are studies that look at how a person, you know, approaches these long-term chronic illnesses and then the ultimate outcome. And the more positive their mindset, the more determined they are, the more drive they are to overcome them. More often than not, they have a better outcome than somebody's like playing the victim card. Why is this happening to me? They curl up on the couch and just basically wait for their number to be called by the man upstairs. Um, and there's three words I've been using on the show recently: never give up. that I think are so powerful. Do you think that if somebody were just to embrace that never give up mentality, no matter what challenge they're facing physically, that automatically is going to put them in a better position to succeed long term than somebody who just woe is me kind of attitude?
Yeah, I think it makes the biggest difference. I think I really like the phrase, if you're going through hell, keep going. You don't want to stop where you are, and you need to have that determination, that grit, that stubbornness to get better, and you need that to push you through, and having a good support team and all that makes a big difference. But in the end, it's sort of how far you're going to push yourself, and taking breaks and all that is okay too, but I think really having the self-determination to get yourself better makes a huge difference.
So, how quickly were you able to, as you began to at least see light at the end of this hellish tunnel that you were going through? How quickly were you able to incorporate new whole plant based foods into your diet? Maybe that raspberry that you had been craving for so long. How quickly were you able to put that stuff back on your plate?
So that stuff came on pretty quickly after I went on the meds for the mast cell. But when I originally first went plant based, we did entirely whole foods focused, fully organic, really healthy cooking. And that was a big switch for me too. Because, like I said, I was used to eating mac and cheese and like grilled cheese and just all the carbs and stuff like that. So it was a big change. But with the mast cell, after not being able to eat food for a while, it probably took about 6 months of adding things in one by one to make sure I wouldn't have a reaction to it before I was able to eat pretty much everything again. And it was easier to maintain my health levels after that too, because I was able to eat whole foods. And as I incorporated more things, I got stronger and everything seemed to ease up a little bit.
And what did that do for your spirits after suffering for so long?
It felt absolutely amazing. I think my mom still has a video on her phone when I ate a raspberry for the first time and was able to try these things where it was like a kid in a candy store. I was just so excited. It was unreal. It felt like Christmas morning every time I was able to add food back into my diet. And I fell in love with cooking all over again, like I said. And it was also sort of a challenge culinary wise, where if you have now 8 foods you can eat, how many things can you make with those 8 foods and how different can it be? And can you serve it to other people if it would still taste good? And I like that puzzle piece of it too, where I was able to push myself creatively in figuring out how to make a pizza out of 6 ingredients and stuff like that.
Do you remember the 6 ingredient pizza?
I don't. I think I probably did like a chickpea flour crust and then like tomato sauce and threw some veggies on top or something. But it really, really rewired my brain cooking wise, going through that process and being limited ingredient wise.
Kind of laid the foundation for what it is that you do today, no?
Yeah, exactly. It really did. I don't think I'd be doing what I am today without any of this happening.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think for a while I wanted to be a fashion designer. That was why I moved to New York City. And it was just during the summer break when I was still in college too. But I went there to take fashion design classes at Parsons. And I didn't feel as big of a connection to it as I thought I would have. So I ended up not pursuing that. And I graduated from Georgetown University with a double major, one in fine arts with a focus on oil painting, and my other was a social justice focus with it was basically just international law and human rights and social justice work.
Oh, you're very creative. I can sense that about you and what your studies were, but your personality as well. And I think that anybody who also by trade is in the kitchen in any form has to have this creative side to them because you know you're a painter. You look at oil painting, but every time that you step into the kitchen and you've got this counter space in front of you, I always look at that as a blank canvas. And what am I going to paint today? Do you feel the same way?
Oh, 100%. I love it. It's a good way to express my creativity, I think, and also feel like I'm making a difference where I can help people and give them tips and show them how to do a plant based lifestyle in a holistic way that still tastes amazing and you feel like you're not missing out on anything.
So, in between opening your restaurant here and back when you were in college, you graduate from Georgetown. You're regaining your confidence. You're regaining your strength. how quickly were you able to reincorporate exercise back into your routine as well? Did that come a while after you were reintroducing foods, or were you finding a way to stay active throughout your entire illness?
No, so that was a huge part of my healing as well. Because after being bedridden, I had lost most of my muscles from crew and I was really deconditioned at that point, which was making the POTS worse because you need that muscle mass to help pump the blood back up towards your heart and your brain. And so I started physical therapy pretty much right away after I was diagnosed with POTS. And that made a huge difference, but it was incredibly difficult. And then slowly after that, I experimented a little bit with what forms of exercise I liked because before it was mostly just weights and then being forced to run on the treadmill and stuff like that, which didn't feel great, but it was fun. And then I found yoga and Pilates and all these other things that I loved. And it really helped find me a meditation practice as well and incorporate stress reducing modalities into my healing, which was also helpful.
Yeah, and you really specific with the yoga and Pilates. Did you begin kind of teaching that or showing others the way with that as well? Did you go down that road?
Yeah, so I actually got my first yoga teaching certificate my senior year of high school. And after school, I'd go down to this yoga place in Potomac, Maryland, and I would do teacher training there and take classes. And then I eventually got my Pilates teaching certificate my first year of college as well. And I started teaching others. I worked at a few Pilates studios and yoga studios, which I liked. But then I started my own business where I offered concierge health and wellness services, and I would do private chef work, teaching people how to cook healthy, holistic meals. And then I also did Pilates and yoga. But it was almost more of in a physical therapy type of sense because I worked with people who mostly had chronic illnesses, injuries, they're recovering from surgeries, all types of different things. And I saw a lot of people get better quickly with that. And that was sort of the motivation that I needed to focus more on that instead of just teaching studio classes.
I bet that that was really rewarding for you as well, given everything that you had gone through.
Oh, it was so rewarding. I worked with a doctor in the DC area, and she would refer patients to me too for this. And a lot of the patients were little kids who were also dealing with POTS. I think the average age of getting diagnosed is 13, and it's mostly girls. I don't know if they have research onto why that is, but um, it was really rewarding getting to work with kids and sort of mentoring them through it and saying, I dealt with this too. I know what it feels like. I know, it doesn't feel great to do physical therapy right now or to be doing the workout and the exercises that we're doing, but it's worth it. And I saw a lot of people go from being bedridden to back to work or back to school and feeling totally healthy and normal after incorporating diet and exercise into their life. And for me, that was huge. And I really felt connected to it.
And speaking of connections, all the while, were you able to kind of reestablish the connections with the peers that you had lost touch with when you were missing those big chunks of time? It sounds like maybe you were, or maybe you've got a new circle of friends at this point.
Yeah, I have a new circle of friends at this point. I think when I went to college, for me, it was a completely fresh start because at least before the mast cell stuff, I felt like I was in a really good place managing the POTS and the EDS. And I had my exercise routine down, I had my diet down, and it was just a good place to meet new people and, start fresh with everything. And then with the mast cell stuff, a little bit of it happened again, but I think I found my people after that and was able to make a bunch of connections that have lasted me years now.
And how long in between the concierge health and wellness and what you are doing currently, which is running and founding and opening this phenomenal restaurant in the DC area, Rooted 3. So what's the gap there?
I think probably 10 years, which is crazy to say. 'Cause
Wow.
I started it when I was really young. I was still a freshman in college, so 18, and I'm almost 30 now. So yeah, probably about 10 years.
Wow. So you're not even 30 years old and
No,
you've
just
been through all of this and you are now running your own restaurant after operating your own business for a decade. I used the term overachiever earlier, and yeah, my suspicions are confirmed, Molly.
it's funny because they say POTS happens to people who are type A usually, overachievers. They say that like all the cortisol in your system just makes you stress out more. So you end up being, worried about everything and being type A, which is kind of funny.
So talk to us about Rooted 3, which is in Bethesda, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Mhm. Yeah, it's in Bethesda, Maryland, which is just 5 minutes over the DC line.
Yeah, that's a fun area too. I like Bethesda. My wife has an office down there, and that's not too far from the Physicians Committee's headquarters, right down there on Wisconsin Avenue, in Friendship Heights. But this is a completely plant-based restaurant. What is on the menu? What are the delicacies? Any of the special dishes that you got super creative with when you were on your path to healing?
Yeah, so the restaurant feels like a culmination of everything that I've been through. And the entire menu is the diet that I use to heal myself and still follow to this day. It's a lifestyle at this point. I wouldn't even call it a diet. And the menu is fully organic. We partnered with a lot of local farmers for local produce that's seasonal, that flips over. Everything I tried to make anti inflammatory and good for you, where you can eat a bunch of it and still feel fantastic afterwards. And no matter what your health journey is, we have options for you. Or if you just want a good meal or to eat more veggies one night a week, we're here for that too. And we have superfood smoothies on the menu. We do bowls, and I wanted to keep some of the comfort foods on the menu too. So we have sides like fries with our house made Cajun seasoning and cauliflower bites, but everything is air fried instead of being fried to keep you feeling good afterwards and anti inflammatory.
Ooh, that's cool. What's your favorite thing on the menu?
Probably, it's hard to say. Smoothie wise, we have a smoothie called the Coffee Powerhouse. That one's probably my favorite. It has cold brew coffee in it, bananas, a tiny bit of organic gluten free oat milk, and then some special seasonings in there like cardamom to give it a little bit of a kick. As for bowls, probably the umami shroom bowl. We have fritters that come as the protein source for everything since it's plant based, and they either have a lentil base or a chickpea base to them. And the umami shroom fritters have a French lentil base, caramelized onions. They have a bunch of cooked down mushrooms in there with coconut aminos. And it's really delicious. It comes with our garlic sauce too, which is probably my favorite dressing, at least this week.
At least this week, and that's an important distinction because as the seasons change, your menu evolves as well, right?
Exactly. So starting in September, most of our, or not most of our menu, but a large chunk of it is going to be flipping over to fall produce. And we're going to have some new bowls added in, some new dressings, and some new smoothies as well. And we're hoping to do Thanksgiving offerings for pre order. So if you have a plant based person in your life and you're not sure what to cook them for Thanksgiving, or you want to incorporate some delicious sides into your traditional Thanksgiving, we'll have that covered.
Ooh, that sounds like fun. I need to get down there. I can't believe that Rooted Three's been open for 6 months as we tape this in mid-July. So 7 months as this airs, and I still have not been. This is just a crime against humanity here.
I know. Yes, come down and try everything.
I will. Like I'm a huge smoothie guy. So the coffee thing that you just described. So what was it? The coffee powerhouse? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Coffee Powerhouse.
Yeah, that sounds really good. What other smoothies are on the menu? Whet
We
my
have one.
appetite.
Yeah, we have one called the Mango Mana. That one has organic mangoes in it, raw young Thai coconut water, coconut meat, tiny bit of cayenne, some turmeric to make it anti-inflammatory as well, and some dates for added sweetness. We don't do any added sugars or anything like that. What are my other favorites? Maybe the Strawberry Fields. I lived in California for a couple years. I actually moved back right in the middle of the pandemic and then decided to open up Rooted 3 here instead of there. But that one's sort of my ode to LA, which is also the other name for it. It has strawberries, mint, raw young Thai coconut meat, and coconut water, and some dates in there too. And it just sort of reminds me of a summery California day. And we have a bunch of green smoothies. We have our Panacea, which is your traditional green smoothie. It has ginger, apple, kale, lemon juice in there, a little bit of coconut water as well. There's sort of something for everybody. Our superfood frosty is also a really good one. That's sort of a take on a chocolate milkshake, and that one's good. I had a customer come in the other day saying she got like a Wendy's frosty or something, and ours was richer and better, which I don't know if I believe, but yeah, we've gotten good
Ooh.
reviews on that one.
Well, I'm happy to do the taste test on that. It's been a long time since I've had a Frosty from Wendy's, but I'm pretty sure the flavor is still locked away in the old noggin here. But something tells me yours is definitely going to be a little bit better than what Wendy has to offer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
All right, so here's the deal. We have a link to the restaurant so you can see the entire menu, all the smoothies, all the delicious bowls, everything that they have to offer. That's in the show description and in the episode notes. Also, if you're on the Gram, X, all the old social medias at Rooted3 Foods. So check them out. I mean, I'm just telling you, you have a heck of a story, Molly. And I love the fact that you have the never give up, or if you're going through hell, keep on going mentality. And I think that that's going to continue to serve you well for the rest of your life. And you've inspired so many people here today. So I can't thank you enough for your time.
No, thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure talking about everything. And I'm just super grateful to be where I am now and back to a completely normal, healthy person. So it is possible if you're dealing with any of the illnesses that I have out there to heal from it completely.